Hey everyone, welcome to the Sword and Laser. I'm Veronica Belmont.
And I'm Tom Merritt.
And this is one of our Google Hangouts. We are live with author Mike Underwood. Mike, thank you so much for being on the show.
No, I'm very glad to be here. Happy to chat with everyone.
Awesome. Now, Mike, if you don't know, is an author, a blogger, and even the North American sales marketing manager for Angry Robot Books. And his first novel, an urban fantasy tale called Geekomancy, was published in July 2012. And his upcoming first print novel, Shield and Crocus, will be here on June 10th. Coming right up, huh?
Yes, I'm at Book Expo this week, Phoenix Comic Con next week, and then it's the launch, so I will sleep on the 11th.
Yeah, definitely.
Sleep is for the week.
Well, we've got a bunch of questions from our Goodreads audience that we can ask you. We have the live Hangout questions available. So if folks are watching on the events page on the Hangout, you can submit questions in there. We'll keep an eye out for those as well. But to start off, I hear we have a friend in common in Adam Christopher.
Yeah, so I get to work with Adam for all of his Angry Robot books. So we started publishing him, and now he's got some books with Tor that are coming out. So Empire State was kind of the book that I talked about in my job interview for when I was trying to get this position. And then I've gotten to meet and chat with Adam at a couple of like World Cons and things like that. So we chat fairly often, also with like Chuck Wendig and Wes Chu and Madeline Ashby, many of whom have been on the show.
Absolutely. Now, do you feel like you've picked up some good tips as a writer by working in the publishing world?
Oh, for sure. I've learned how to position a book, have a better sense of where my work fits in the broader genre, and then I get to read amazing fiction on the job. So I get to read like Chuck Wendig's Blackbirds and see how he has just annihilated so many of the rest of us with his razor-sharp voice in the Miriam Black series. And so I get to see people operating at the top of the game. And I have colleagues who are editors and publicists, so I get to steal their tricks as well.
Tell us about your first novel, Geekomancy. Now, you say on your site that it pulls influences from several fan favorites, things like Buffy, The Dresden Files. What's it about?
So Geekomancy is the result of me thinking, what would geek magic be? And so what I ended up creating is kind of a fictional city, and the main character, Ree Reyes, is a geeky woman in her 20s just trying to kind of make a living, and she kind of accidentally falls into the magical subculture of geekomancers, who are people who use their love of SF and they do magic. So a geekomancer can pick up a Star Wars blaster prop and use it as an actual blaster because it runs on a nostalgia battery that accumulates all of the love and appreciation of blasters, and it puts it and divides into the different props. She could tear up a Magic the Gathering card and do a one-shot effect. And then the most powerful style of geekomancy is genre emulation, where she can watch a TV show or a movie that she loves and then dial into that world. Watch The Matrix, do wire fu. Watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer, punching and quipping. So this Ree kind of embraces the heroic life because she's been raised on these stories and is now getting to make a difference. So it's for anyone who has enjoyed Ready Player One or likes Jim Hines' Libromancer series, it's got that same kind of punchy pop culture feel in an urban fantasy setup.
It's making me look around at anything I have lying about in a whole new light.
Yeah, I'm trying to decide what my thing would be, like what particular one I would want to.
I'm just more worried if she came over to my house, what she would do to me with things that I...
I like that she can
That's actually
have,
a weapon now.
Yeah,
Right.
like she can have any ability. It's not like she has to pick one. She's not like an X-Men where you get like one ability or two abilities and that's kind of your thing. It seems like her ability is taking other people's abilities or using those abilities.
It's all about her passion. So if she watches a movie that she doesn't really like, she's not going to get as much out of it as if she goes back to Star Wars or The Matrix or Buffy. So she kind of has her favorites that I've developed throughout the series, which then kind of becomes her geekomantic utility belt. But then sometimes she needs to find a new way of doing something. So in the most recent novella, she emulates Die Hard in order to kind of have John McClane's inexorable inertia so that she can keep going long and long into a fight.
I would want Sherlock's abilities, I
Oh,
think, to be
yeah.
able to solve crimes and deduce things.
Yeah, I put that actually in the first book. She watches the BBC Sherlock, and then she sees the pop-up text to say, "Oh well, my landlord had has a surgical scar here and walks with this limp and has this much sun damage. So you must have been a staff sergeant in Operation Iraqi Freedom."
That's crazy. So she just takes on the Sherlock talent, but also the presentation as well.
Yeah, so in some places there's the danger that her kind of speech patterns slip into the thing she's emulating.
Hmm.
So she copies The Princess Bride, and then she's talking kind of Renaissance fantasy flowery, and when she copies Sherlock, she's kind of as stubborn and blunt as the Cumberbatch version of the character is.
Interesting. Kung
That
Fu
is super
movie.
awesome.
Wow. Words aren't even going to match her lips anymore.
So what is she fighting against?
So in the first book, she kind of gets recruited by a senior geekomancer who goes by the handle of Eastwood, who's trying to track down some teen suicides. And so she has him as a mentor for a while as they're trying to figure out what's going on. But he's really a terrible Obi-Wan Kenobi
Hmm.
for her because he really has no investment in being a teacher. And then as things go on, kind of he shows more of his true colors, and there's some complicated positionality going on, and she's kind of steps up to the plate because one of the kids that becomes endangered is a friend of hers through her work. So she's got a personal investment, and then by the time the first story is done, she's like, nope, this is a thing I'm going to do because I can help.
Is there other magic in the world, or is it pretty much just geekomancy?
There's a lot of different styles. In the first book, I establish bromancy, so that's kind of that fraternity magic where you can do a chest bump and then do amazing things. The second book is called celebromancy, which is the magic of fame. So you have a big movie star comes to town and she's going to do a TV show, and people with celebromancy can say, "I'm so famous that I have an instant Photoshop makeover." You can walk into a room, command the entire room's attention, and be more gorgeous, more charismatic than you could be normally. And I've got a few other magic styles that I'm intended to be as distinct, so it's not pyromancy and telekinesis. It's going to be something interesting and kind of cultural.
Celebromancy seems totally unfair. Like, really?
It really
You're
is.
already famous, and then you get all these abilities too.
Yeah, and I kind of postulate a version of Hollywood that's run by a celebromantic cartel, where
Uh-huh.
they're kind of influencing what's going to be a hit, because then that gives them more power that they then use for other things.
Oh yeah, that's brilliant.
That is really interesting. But also, I was looking into kind of the plot line of Shield and Crocus. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay, so the book that's coming out in June, and I also kind of loved the world that you had built around it, like the civilization, the city of people residing and building their homes within the bones of this Titan, this massive giant. And I just kind of fell in love with that idea. So what inspired that story?
So Shield and Crocus has actually been with me since like summer of 2007 when I did the Clarion West workshop out in Seattle. And one of my classmates wrote a new weird story. So in the tradition of China Mieville, Jeff Vandermeer, KJ Bishop, and that story was great, and it just blew me away. And I said, I'm going to do this thing. So I took the new weird, and I wanted to combine it with something because I love genre mashups. And I decided that I could mash it up with superheroes because the superhero genre is really energetic and optimistic, but it tends to be kind of reactive. And between Marvel and DC, it's mostly heroes who are preserving the status quo. So I wanted to have heroes who are revolutionaries. So I took some of the things I like best about the New Weird setting, kind of critical innovation, and then combined that with the action adventure and the optimism of superheroes. And I just had this image of a chalk outline of a person that was the skeleton of a Titan, and then you could build a whole city up in it, kind of as a literalized body politic. All of the rich and the collaborators with the tyrants live in the head and the heart, and the peasants live in tenements out in the fingers and at the crotch.
That's a brilliant metaphor. It reminds me of a level of an online role-playing game, right? It would be perfect for that, to sort of like weave your way through those different neighborhoods and explore politic, exactly.
So is it
Yeah.
like they're living in the actual skeleton, right? So is that like becoming the structure of the buildings? Is it kind of built in that way?
Some of them are. There are neighborhoods inside the skull, and there's building on top of the crown of the skull. So there's a tower of the city goddess, the city mother, and that's kind of the highest point in the entire city, looking from the skull all the way down across the city. But most of the buildings are built kind of outside and around the skeleton because there's actually monsters called shardlings that live inside the hollows of the skeleton. So it's not safe to travel there, though sometimes the shields do because they need to get from one side of the city to another when the tyrants' patrols are active.
Now, we mentioned Jim Butcher earlier, and I want to know if there are certain authors you sort of hold up as role models or influences or people that you feel like, even if it's not that you want to achieve the same kind of writing, you want to achieve that kind of success.
Yeah, I have the fortune of a lot of role models between my work at Angry Robot and having friends who kind of brought me into the community when I was a brand noob. Marie Brennan is an old friend of mine from our college days, actually.
Oh, wow.
So she started selling books, and we were in a critique group together, and she kind of helped me out when I was brand new. And so I've had a lot of people I can look up to. She's aggressively competent, as some of my other friends are, but I look up to the productivity and professionalism of Chuck Wendig, of Seanan McGuire. I look up to the prose and kind of plot crafting of Scott Lynch. I look up to the sociological kind of exploration and investigation of Octavia Butler. I try to read widely and to take my influences widely so that I can kind of join the conversation and expect a lot of myself, because I always want to be giving myself a new challenge with every project so that I'm developing and getting better as a writer.
That's awesome. Yeah, those are all great people especially if you have had the opportunity to really get to know them and take inspiration from them and learn from them on a personal level. It sounds like you're pretty well set up in that regard.
Yeah, I never got to meet Octavia Butler, unfortunately, but I've worked with people who've studied under her. I've got to chat with Scott Lynch at a couple of conventions, and I talk with Chuck a lot. So I took a class last fall with Mary Robinette Cole on writing fast, and then wrote a novel draft in about 5 weeks. So it worked. She's a great teacher.
She was posting up some cute Instagram pictures of her and Marie Brennan doing some of their cosplay stuff this past week on Instagram. I was getting a kick out of that. It's always fun when you hear about like authors who you really love and admire, like know each other and hang out with each other, and you're like, that's cool. You guys must have awesome conversations. But aside, anyway, so what else are you reading these days, if you even have the time?
So I just finished reading Misery by Stephen King, because my fiance is a huge Stephen King fan, so she's been kind of sliding them at me. I'd read the first 2 Dark Tower books, and then I read Salem's Lot and just did Misery, and Misery was phenomenal. Kind of reading as a writer and seeing very clearly where King had experiences with fans and was kind of imagining forward that way. I also really liked The Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison, which I read just recently. It's a nice antidote to grimdark. If you've been reading a lot of fantasy and it's very angsty and lots of anti-heroes, Goblin Emperor is just delightful.
We have been reading a lot of grimdark recently. Some of it's been a little more grim than others.
Yeah, there were people also complaining on the other side of the fence, on the science fiction side of the fence. A lot of peril novels with Wool and The Martian and things like that. So good to have something to lighten the mood.
Absolutely.
We have a lot of people in our audience who want to become writers, or they're getting started being a writer. We always like to ask authors for anything that they would tell folks getting started writing. But with your position, any tips not only on becoming a successful author, but also getting published?
Yeah, I think it's a great time to be trying to get into writing, just because there's so many options. I work in traditional publishing. I'm traditionally published, but I try to be aware of everything. And I think that there are projects where it's great to self-publish because you want the control, or you have a specific way of doing things, or you've got a great social network, so you can think about kickstarting a project. I think one thing that writers can really do is take an honest look at how they want to build their career and get a sense of what path up the mountain will let them get to the type of career they want to have. If you want to hit the New York Times bestseller list, you're pretty much going to want to go traditional. If you want to get a ton of readers, you can self-publish and build a community that way. We have a lot of options, and I think as long as you arm yourself with a lot of information and are very clear about what your agenda is, there's a lot of different ways of going about it, and you can kind of be the captain of your own boat that is your career and just kind of sail the waters on your own terms.
Having worked in publishing, are there any common mistakes that you see new writers making?
Yeah, I think it's really important to know where your work fits into the market. If you're writing science fiction fantasy, it may not do you a whole lot of good to write to an agent and say, I have recently completed a science fiction fantasy book, young adult, new adult, crossover book that appeals equally to both markets. If you're going to pitch a book, pitch it into a market, say why it fits that market. And if you have a work that really truly crosses over, write 2 pitches. Write one that says, this is totally a YA book and here's why. Write another pitch that this is totally an adult book and here's why. Because if it really is that perfect crossover, the team you work with will recognize that and they'll do the work. When you're trying to get attention and trying to get an agent, trying to get a publisher, I think it's really important to respect the system that you're working into and to not try to make yourself out to be too much of a special snowflake. Show that you know the business, and then let the work specialness kind of reveal itself.
So learn how to play the game.
Yeah, if you want to win the game, learn to play the game. And then when you're in it and you know it, then you can break a lot of rules.
Now, Mike's too nice to say this, but essentially it's learn to play, noobs.
Learn to play, noobs. L to P, as we say in the gaming world. Well, that actually wraps up our interview. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people follow all of your work online?
Yeah, I'm at michaelrunderwood.com, and then I spend way too much time on Twitter at Mike R. Underwood, so people can find me there.
Awesome. And the new book comes out on June 10th. That is Shield and Crocus. And I'm very excited to check that one out. And you must be excited to finally be done and ready to launch.
Yes, it's been a very long path since a short story into a novel and then kind of back and forth. And now years later, it's all grown up and it's going off in the world to have adventures.
Yay! Fly, little book, be free.
Fly, be free, fly. All right, and if you guys want to follow us and get in touch, our email address is feedback@swordandlaser.com. Our website is swordandlaser.com. All of our discussions happen over on goodreads.com. And if you want to call and leave a voicemail, the phone number is 415-7-SWORD-6. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.